Oh, okay. Yeah. Uh-huh. Really? Okay. Nice. Yeah. Right. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Okay. I didn't know that. Yeah. All right. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and obviously today we are talking about Marvel's acquisition, or rather Disney's acquisition of Fox Entertainment. 20th Century Fox's movie and TV rights being the most important parts of that purchase. And specifically today, I wanted to discuss what it means for movies going forward that are Marvel and MCU universe encapsulating, and then most importantly what it means for Marvel games, particularly Marvel Future Fight, which is the game that the majority of the fans in this community like to watch me play and discuss things about. So just to be clear, before we start with the actual specifics of the deal and what it's going to mean for Marvel games and movies, we have to clarify something. When Disney purchased 20th Century Fox, they are merely purchasing the rights to show movies or TV shows featuring these characters. These characters were never sold off in their video game rights. That's why there have existed and do still exist games that had the Fantastic Four, or that have certain X-Men characters or other characters from other, sub Marvel comic series that were not in any of the MCU movies and could not be in any of the MCU or Marvel or Disney movies, because it was the movie and TV rights that were owned by 20th Century Fox. So nothing has actually changed for the video game industry for Marvel and for Disney. The only thing that's changed for them is that they now have everything under one roof. So there is no more, or there's no longer the issue of advertising by making Fantastic Four comics or making games with the Fantastic Four or another brand, let's say the X-Men, advertising those things, which would then support or be kind of favorable to 20th Century Fox's movies and TV shows. So that is the biggest difference and the biggest part of this puzzle that you need to understand. This is encouraging because it means that the heads of Marvel and the heads of Disney can now basically do whatever they want with these characters without the jealousy or the kind of conflict of advertising for another company's movies and another company's TV shows that was reaping the benefits of Fantastic Four comic sales, Fantastic Four video game sales, and other properties like the X-Men. But aside from that, once we have that under control, we can now see the benefits that Marvel fans are going to reap, hopefully, now that this new chapter and this new kind of super conglomerate has been born out of this purchase. There is still a phase that Marvel and Disney are going to have to go through, regulatory phase, so that the government or some government body can check and make sure that there's no shenanigans underneath the rug, that there aren't any skeletons in the closet, so to speak, as a part of this 50 billion plus deal. But assuming all things go smoothly from here, what does it mean for Marvel games and the Marvel MCU? Well, the Fantastic Four are probably the most notable franchise that hasn't seen much action in video games for a long time and has been met with some of the worst movie reviews and creations, creatively speaking, of all Marvel properties. They're probably the most maligned group of any, and that is saying a lot when you watch things like sewn up mouth Deadpool from Wolverine's third solo movie and stuff like that. But the Fantastic Four are due for a revival in a big way. They're very favored in the community, both for Marvel comic fans, movie fans, and video game fans. They're a lovable group. They have diversity, and they just have a lot of awesome adventures that they go on as a core and individually, and they have great crossovers, Human Torch and Spider-Man. There's lots of different interplay between these characters and other existing characters from Marvel. So you could probably expect a Fantastic Four update in Marvel Future Fight sometime in the future, but I'm going to discuss how far in the future some of these things could be when we tie this idea of new characters in video games to the existing MCU platform, because the movies are actually the biggest clue that we have to when we may or may not see these characters in video games, at least in my opinion. Of course, other properties that we could get right alongside the Fantastic Four is Doctor Doom, one of the greatest Marvel supervillains of all time. Aside from being one of the main villains for the Fantastic Four, Doctor Doom also has his hands in a lot of different, parts of the Marvel universe. He's one of the most prolific villains, a la Thanos. So we could get an epic quest. We could get new world bosses, for example, in Marvel Future Fight featuring Doctor Doom. He's a very beloved villain, and he's just so popular and so everywhere that it just would be wrong not to have him return to video games and the MCU in general. In addition to them, you also have the likes of Galactus, again, a very powerful and very kind of everywhere type of villain. He's got different incarnations where he does good things versus bad things, but generally speaking, he eats worlds. Along with Galactus, you have, of course, the Silver Surfer, his kind of OG herald, or butler, it should seem. Again, tied closely to the Fantastic Four, as we've seen in previous movies, but he has a lot of his own standalone stuff. In addition, all of the other X-Men that weren't featured till now in video games can now just be freely added. They were not featured in the MCU at all, again, because of the movie right issue, but they could be in games. That's why Marvel Contest of Champions, Puzzle Quest, before it got killed, Marvel Heroes, Marvel Future Fight now, because the reason why all these games had these characters is because the video game rights were never at risk or were never being controlled by 20th Century Fox. They were always owned by Marvel and therefore owned by Disney. It's just that Disney didn't want to advertise for Fox, but they changed their mind, at least in certain video games, for certain members of the X-Men. Now, whether we're going to see the additional X-Men, the lesser characters and the whole cast join in all these video games is kind of up in the air, and it probably has more to do with the individual publishers, Netmarble, Kabam, etc., than it does have to do with Marvel's side of things, depending on who they want to really promote or not promote specifically. Of course, we also have the fan favorite Deadpool, owned by 20th Century Fox, now owned by Disney, and we should be seeing him very soon, not because of this acquisition. I don't think that Marvel and Disney purchasing 20th Century Fox brings Deadpool closer to Marvel Future Fight. I think it's actually the Deadpool movie that brings him a lot closer, and the Deadpool movie is actually not on this kind of Marvel timeline because this is the MCU, and the Deadpool movies, at least 1 and 2, have been produced by 20th Century Fox. But the 20th Century Fox movies still push these characters into the minds collectively of the consumers, and so watching the movies, playing the games, these things go hand in hand. So yes, I expect to see, for example, when we get the Black Panther movie in early 2018, in the middle of this graphic, I do expect an update for Black Panther. I do expect new characters like Ulysses Claw or Warmonger or is it Killmonger and Shuri. I do expect that, in the same way that I expect Deadpool to come to this game to kind of coincide with the movie. Now, I mentioned this earlier, but I think that the MCU is the best indication for when we would see some of these characters, if not most of these new characters, in video games. And as you can see, up until 2019, Marvel is tied up with existing properties. They've got TV shows, they've got movies, they've got, culminating movies, these huge Phase 3 finishers with Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2. So this is going to take us all the way until 2 years from now, winter 2019, which means that they can't even start production on some of these movies until probably late 2018, which puts any kind of new characters, if they want to coincide them with the MCU, at least a year away. Now, am I saying that I know for sure that the Fantastic Four are not going to be introduced to Contest of Champions, Marvel Future Fight, etc. until next year, until 12 months from now? No, of course not. For all I know, they could be introduced in 6 months or even 4 months. But Netmarble has developed a bit of a pattern, a bit of a track record for intentionally delaying certain updates in certain games in order to coincide with these events in the real life, in the MCU universe. It's not a coincidence that now, with their 3rd anniversary, Contest of Champions is having a Thanos themed kind of realm and fighting arena and kind of map, labyrinth. And the MCU movie for Infinity War is less than, 6 months away, 7 months away at this point. So these things are not coincidental. We had Guardians of the Galaxy 2, the movie, come out, and it was almost immediately welcomed into Marvel Future Fight with the 2-year anniversary update that included, again, the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. There was other content, but you can see that there's a very close relationship between the movies, the MCU, and the video game. So that may or may not bode well for the video games, but I do hope, and I do, really am eagerly awaiting to see characters like Deadpool, Fantastic Four, Doctor Doom to join in these video games, and they may precede the movies if Marvel wants to kind of ramp up anticipation for their eventual return to the cinematic universe and their integration into this much wider Marvel, cinematic universe that they've developed on the big screen. Finally, I do want to just make a very short mention of kind of some of the negative aspect to Marvel purchasing 20th Century Fox, and that has to do with creativity and the difference between having one studio create all of the movies versus having different studios create parts of these kind of universes, and then you can kind of just see them how you like. While many people, and myself included, I'm a big fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and what they do, I do have to admit that there is a lot of repetition, and there is a lot of the same themes and colors and kind of style used in the movies, especially as of late. Marvel has become very good at creating digestible movies, but they're predictable in that digestivity. Much like, Thor 3, you could see a lot of the jokes coming, you could see the kind of pattern of the plot developing. There aren't a lot of twists, there aren't a lot of risks taken with these movies because they're safe movies, they make a lot of money, and they're very widely applicable to basically any fan base, whether you're a young child, as young as like 6-7 years old, all the way up to the older fans in their 40s and 50s, and maybe even older. The risk with having a predictable formula for your movies is that they can become stale, and fans can become bored and easily kind of replace what you're doing with something else that's new, innovative, and that takes risks. Two of the best MCU movies, or two of the best Marvel movies that are not MCU movies as of late, are Logan and Deadpool. These are two adult-centered, R-rated movies that deal with themes and concepts that the MCU is probably too afraid to deal with because they're not Disney, they're not kid-friendly. We may be at risk of losing those now that this purchase has gone through, if it eventually gets approved, and if Marvel and Disney do not want to continue that different path that movies like Deadpool and Logan have kind of pioneered, this kind of more adult, mature kind of comic book hero movie. So that is my only concern about Marvel purchasing 20th Century Fox and kind of Disney owning all of the Marvel heroes under one roof. Essentially, if you want to think about it now, Marvel has the ability and has the lack of an excuse to put basically any hero they want under the sun, under the Marvel brand, into any of their Marvel games, as long as it's not potentially Spider-Man and that associated universe, because that is the only holdout still owned by Sony. That's why we're seeing a solo Venom movie not being produced by Marvel and not in the MCU universe, and that's why we see Spider-Man only appearing in MCU movies when it's sanctioned and approved specifically by Sony. So I don't think we're going to lose Spider-Man from video games anytime soon, because that's one of Marvel's greatest properties and they don't want to lose that revenue. But it could mean that some of the lesser known Spider-Man villains may never make their appearance in video games because of that. But otherwise, Marvel and Disney now own pretty much the rest of the pie, like 99%. So it's safe to say that if we don't see these heroes, if we don't see the Fantastic Four, etc., Deadpool in video games, it's because there's someone at Disney or there's someone at Marvel who's just not willing to take that leap or doesn't want to write that signature or whatever, or it's someone on the publisher's side who doesn't have the resources, or they don't have the time necessary to build that character into their existing game formula and game engine. So that is my breakdown of Marvel purchasing and Disney purchasing 20th Century Fox and the impact it's going to have mostly on the video games, especially Marvel Future Fight, but also on the MCU, both positive and slightly less positive. But let me know what you think in the comments below. I know a lot of you are going to tell me who you're most eager to see join Future Fight, so let me know and I'll kind of try to pick my favorite one out of all the ones that could possibly join us, and maybe you can even guess when they're going to join us if you want to be a bit more of a clairvoyant. Subscribe if you enjoy the content and you want to support me, and of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.